Good morning, everybody. Thank you to Tony Simpson for the, as I was teasing him, for the warm-up act ahead of the main show, because we are joined by some fantastic people on the panel this morning. My name is Trevor Watkins. I'm the Global Head of Sports at multinational law firm Pinsent Masons. The subject today is the football business landscape. We're going to be looking at why we're here and where we're going to go to next. As an English person, that's probably highly relevant given Brexit, but in terms of football and the way that is going to develop, I think it's fascinating. I mean, I've been to virtually every Soccerex, I think, since it started in the late 1990s, and yet here we are, 20-something years on, still discussing football, the importance of it in the landscape. So to my far left, we have Oliver Seitz from the Johan Cruyff Institute on the Master's Program, the development there. We'll be looking at some of the impact there on education, the way that's developing sport. We have Pablo Ortiz Donere, who has a fascinating background from Deportivo Alaves, with not just two soccer teams, but a basketball team and a consultancy business. Pedro Trangros from Brazil, who will bring a lot of insight into the world of South American football, its interaction with the global football game, and social importance of the game. And Andrew Nestor, who's flown in from the USA to be with us, investor in Bologna, used to run Tampa Bay Rowdies. So we have quite an amazing array of talent. I'm going to open it up with you, Andrew. Football business landscape, who on earth would invest in football and why?
Well, there's different motivations, obviously, for investing, so therefore you have different types of groups. From a high net worth individual family office perspective, the globalization of the sport, really through media, has made it more accessible. So it's become more of a known asset to investors, and therefore there's a comfort level and a better understanding of the business model, which lends itself to then wanting to invest into the sport. However, I think what you see now more often is larger groups that already have other sports teams now investing into football clubs in different countries. The valuations of these tentpole assets has grown so significantly that they've really become full-scale sports entertainment businesses. So now you have these organizations that have created venture funds to invest into technologies and complementary businesses to their assets. They have the personnel now to then be able to go and expand and utilize those assets and their knowledge base to invest and hopefully use that knowledge base to lead to asset appreciation when they invest into football clubs.
And you've run a US team.
Yes.
And you've invested in Italian soccer, team that you got into the top 10 in Serie A. What changes have you seen in the last couple of years from your time in the US to the time in Italy?
Well, in the US, there's been an obvious growth in the sport. So in terms of not just the quality of investor into the sport, but looking at the front office of these teams, they've matured very quickly. And we've seen the same across Italy, is really bringing best practices in from a commercial perspective. Obviously not so much on the football side, that was already there, but it's now how do you take the history and the brand that you've acquired and build out a broader commercial platform, and that's been changing very rapidly.
And we're just going to move on to Pablo in a second, but one last point. You're also involved with Dugout.
Yes.
And Dugout, for those who don't know, 20 seconds does?
We are essentially a video repository and data company for clubs with an in-bed player that distributes clubs' rights-cleared content to third-party publishers, giving the clubs reach, data, and monetization opportunities around the world to their global fan base.
So running a US team, investing in an Italian team, and investing in technology and other businesses. Pablo, Alaves, good morning. Deportivo Alaves, a team here, or team in Spain, team in Croatia, a basketball team.
Yeah, actually we are a basketball team. So it's the only case, I think, in Europe that a basketball team owns a football club. Normally it's the opposite way around. So Baskonia is the headquarters. Then we run Deportivo Alaves in First Division in Spain. And then we own NK Istra in First Division in Croatia. So talking about management of clubs is quite a different approach.
And you shared with us earlier that your business actually consults
Yeah.
other teams in Japan and in
Yeah.
France.
We also give services to manage clubs, helping them in sports side, ticketing, marketing, sponsorship, all the areas. And then we can do different models like outsourcing of the management of the club or just a consultancy project. We have a project in Japan with Kagoshima United in second division, J2. We're very happy with it.
And so what is the investment strategy? What is driving your investor group in the way it's doing business now?
It's depending of the opportunity. So we don't have like a financial specialist that they have a portfolio, they have a, how you call it, key points that you need to fulfill, and if it's happening, you go. We're just going through the opportunities. But it's very interesting about the ownership we talk, because in La Liga, in a normal company, you ask to the manager, say, why are you in this business? And normally everybody says, to win money, to earn money, to make money. In the football business, this question is not that easy. Why are you in this business? Maybe you are a rich guy and you have an expensive toy, or maybe you are, I don't know, the representative of a lot of owners, small owners. So you're playing a game that everybody have different interests, and they are there for a different reason. Mm-hmm. So it's something that you need to understand to compete. Not competing in the football pitch, to compete like companies.
Oliver, from your perspective, running an institute with a number of students who are coming to learn about sport, the business of sport, what are you seeing in terms of the changes, what they're learning, and what you're seeing on the world stage?
Hi, Trevor. Thanks for the question. We at our program, we have the opportunity to have contact with people from all over the globe. This is a very unique characteristic of the program. So we often have students coming from, we just have a kid that, not a kid, but he bought a club in the 3rd division of Malaysia. And then there's another one that bought a big club in Europe. And then what you see, is there are a few key drivers that is creating incentive for someone to buy a club. Usually, you have that passion. People want to be involved with football, but then you bring in what Pablo said. You know, there's a person who brings in the idea of making money of football, and then you can actually see the balance. How much person wants to be involved with football, how much wants to make money, and not often you get to see something that you can be involved and make money at the same time. Because to be involved with football, to make money, you have to let a lot of things go. But if you want to be passionate and you want to get really involved with the club, it's almost a certain thing you will lose money, and a lot of money. So to be able to create a model where you can get in, have the cash flow, perhaps build equity, and also extract the prestige that the game will bring you, the emotional profit that you can make from the game. That's a very, very tricky thing.
I mean, it is fascinating. If we take it away perhaps from sort of the European game, Pedro, from your perspective, Brazil, different models, different approaches to ownership, different approaches to investment in the game?
Well, very much so. Just considering that we have here in the panel people investing worldwide and none of them invested in Brazil is something remarkable, especially if you think that Brazil is one of the 10th largest economies in the world, 210 million people. If we look at the data the General Secretary of the European Clubs Association brought today, Brazilian Football League would be amongst the 5 or 6 top leagues in Europe in revenues altogether. And then we have no investor in Brazil whatsoever. And then, if you look at Manchester City buying 6 or 7 clubs, one in Uruguay. If you look at Americans and Chinese, now they own almost 40% of all the capital in the 5 top leagues in Europe. And Brazil being the highest exporter of players, we export 1,200 players every year, everywhere. By the way, in almost all top clubs, you have a Brazilian being the top player. why we don't have international investors in Brazil and why we don't have investors in Brazil. That's something that is about to change because the Congress now is discussing new legislation, allowing clubs to become companies in favorable grounds, not paying the same amount of taxes, actually getting a huge discount in the debt they have now towards the state, and even more so, guaranteeing the governance and the legal security investors need to invest. So I think that Brazil will be in the next Soccerex here at Oeiras with a very new panorama to present, and I hope with some investors from this panel.
Hopefully.
Why not? There is a club in Brazil. That's something interesting to mention. Botafogo probably is the club that, with Santos, got the highest number of players in the national team. It was the club of Garrincha, Nilton Santos, together with Santos, that was the club of Pelé. I believe in Brazilian history, it was the club with the highest number of players at the national team. Has just decided that they want an investor, they want to carve out football from the club, create a company where the club will not be involved in the management. It's the first time a big Brazilian club accepts that an investor, let's say you or Manchester United, wants to manage this club in Brazil, will have 100% of the management of the club. Because usually, Brazilian clubs, they want investment for them to manage. But then, who will invest in someone who is not managing well? That's something very difficult to find. It's possible. We have Kia in Corinthians, ISL in Flamengo, Nations Bank in Vasco, but I think this model is over now. So
is this investment to make money? Is this people coming in? Because how do you balance that with, and I know you're a big advocate of social responsibility, should you just let these people come in and start buying up the clubs so they can make money out of the player trading?
Well, if we look at Paris Saint-Germain, Chelsea, even Milan with Berlusconi, if you have this kind of investors that only put money and don't take money, they are very much welcome. Because that's what we have. When we look at all this money we see floating around, these investors, the big one, usually they don't get money out of the operation. Look at the balance sheets of the clubs. And by the way, why do we want so much money? Like, let me leverage on the previous panel, the comment from the executive of Sevilla. We are now fighting to get money from sports betting for new screens and for all these kind of new revenues that we can imagine. But what for? To pay more money to players, to pay more money to coaches. Are they really responding better because they are paying higher salaries? I mean, that's something that we need to think about, because if we look at sports as a business, and it is, we must always remember that it's not just a business. There is something more in there, because when there was no money, people were playing sports. And by the way, when people start playing sports, they actually pay to play. So the essence of sports is something much that goes beyond business.
Well, let's hold you there. I know you've got a video.
Yes, I do.
Let's see your video, and then we're going to go to Andrew and ask whether it's a sin to make some money out of football, and can you make money out of football?
Well, now that you called the video, I think I have to show the video. I was about...
Well, is he going to come on?
No, I wanted to wait to the end just to illustrate how a football club can go much beyond business, touching people's lives and changing people's lives for the better. And football clubs, sports players, they should always think that they have a responsibility towards the world, to make the world a better place, and they can do it. I have just one example, but I could bring many. Roma has just made a campaign presenting their new players together with missing children, and they helped finding these missing children just by leveraging on the image they have and the exposure and the outlets they have. So I'm bringing an example from a club from the countryside of Brazil, Recife. It's not even one of the major clubs, to show that every club, everywhere, every player, everywhere, can do something and must do something. So I just wanted to illustrate this argument. The video, please.
Video, let's see the video.
Yes.
O amor que eu tenho pelo esporte é tudo.
A maior não tem comparação de torcida, não tem. O resto é resto, o esporte é tudo.
família enquanto eu trabalho.
Prometo que os seus olhos vão continuar assistindo o esporte.
Que os seus pulmões continuarão respirando pelo esporte.
Prometo que o seu coração sempre baterá pelo esporte.
Só se doa órgãos no Brasil, né, após a morte, depois que a família ela decide e assina um termo que autoriza essa doação.
A gente tem uma alta taxa de negativa das famílias.
Eu sou rubro-negra até depois de morrer, irmão. Ter a alma é rubro-negra.
Ainda mais se quando eu doar meus órgãos, pô, meu pulmão for pro cara do Náutico, torcedor do Náutico, ele vai respirar o esporte.
Se alguém leva meu coração, leva o esporte junto.
O meu coração vai transformar alguém em torcedor do esporte.
Nos gramados, o esporte está com uma campanha super bacana, pode salvar muitas vidas. Conta essa história pra gente.
Eu não esperava que fosse assim tão rápido. Tá, eu estou muito feliz. Agora que chegou novo aqui, ele é do esporte. E vamos continuar torcendo pro esporte e vamos aí, torcida do esporte, vamos doar. Nós vamos tomar essa corrente, né? Não vamos mais parar.
Andrew, from your perspective as a team owner, some might say that's good business practice anyway, to be in touch with your community. But how do you balance social responsibility as an owner as against the protection of investors' money, the desire not to lose it? How have you found that?
It's really not a zero-sum game. Both are very important. I mean, sporting clubs, no matter what the sport, is essentially owned by the community, and as a team owner, as a team executive, you're a steward for that asset. Clearly, you have to be a sustainable organization to then be able to make a difference. So you do have to balance your finances with how you participate in the community. But they absolutely go hand in hand. You know, it's different depending on your community and what you're trying to achieve. But yeah, they're both very important.
No, I certainly found that when I took over Bournemouth in '97, it was a fans' rescue. But after a year or 2 years, the fans who weren't running the club, they said, well, how are we going to win? We need a left back, we need a centre forward. Oliver, from your perspective, I mean, now in the Premier League, but Oliver, from your perspective, sustainability in modern sport, modern football, what does that mean? How do we achieve it?
I think a football club can be a very complex organization. I think this complexity is growing as money into the game is growing, because the expectation from what the organization provides to the public is also increasing, because people think now you have more money, you also have to deliver. You are not just a company, you are not just a business. You have to develop, in some ways, performance, but then in other ways, as Pedro clearly mentioned here, you do have that social responsibility, which in normal companies or regular companies, you would have, it's okay, go for profit, but then please do something for the community as well. As in a football club, you have to do a lot for the community, you have to provide performance, and then perhaps make a profit. I think this is very tricky for investment, because when you go into the club believing or expecting to be able to take out dividends year after year without delivering both sports and the community side, you will face mid and long-term problems. I think that's one thing that investors, when they go to the club, they might face difficulties because they are not prepared for that. They do not put that into the business plan, and knowing that there's a part of the profit that has to be retained into sports and other in community. And if you don't do that, the project may fail.
So should an owner then be able to take a dividend out of a football club?
That's one question. Microsoft also have a very good responsibility in community, a good foundation, and they make profit. So we can talk about fans and how romantic football is, but the reality is out there is a lot of people counting numbers. And this is a business. And there's a lot of players coming and going, and a lot of money coming and going, and the club is just another stakeholder of the business. And it's a company and make profit. I should be making profit. The question is why the owners come to the football, which is your reason. And the answer can be very different in different clubs. But the reality is a business. And we need to start to accept that the clubs can make dividends for the owners, because it's a normal thing in business.
Put it the other way around. In England recently, we've had 2 very high-profile cases of clubs in deep financial trouble. Should we, in your view, try to save a club if its finances are bust, or should we just let it die? Should market forces take control?
Obviously, if a company fails, nobody is going to rescue them, and the fans, the value that they have for the fans don't go for them, normally it's going to die. I'm so sorry to say that this is football, or we are fans of clubs when we are kids, but it's a business. We can call to the clients or to the customer fans, we can call to the client partners, but at the end of the day, it's a business. We have to realize this. I'm so sorry to tell that, but we need to realize this is a business.
We had the same thing.
I think this is a changing phase of football now, because up to now, what you have investors investing in clubs for the benefit of the club and the community. But now, and people were expecting that. So Manchester United almost went bankrupt in the 40s, 50s. A rich guy would come and invest money and save the club, a local businessman. But now what you have is you have this international investors going there, not necessarily for the benefit of the community and team itself. So what they want, what they expect, the investors, is different from what the fans and the community who has been sustaining the club for such a long time are expecting. So you start to have a bit of noise in there.
And what you've seen just up the road, you've seen American private equity investors buy Estoril.
Yeah.
They've also bought a Spanish team. They have a large stake in an English Premier League team. And in our business, we're seeing more people wanting to buy teams in Europe than at any other time. We probably have 12 to 15 transactions ongoing in European soccer. Pedro, from your perspective, should we just let anybody who wants to buy a team buy a team?
Why not?
Restrictions, controls?
Well, one thing that you must have in place is full disclosure of the beneficial owner. That's something that must be there in football, because you cannot run the risk of having the same group controlling both teams playing, directly and indirectly. So full disclosure of the beneficial owner. That's, for me, the key. But if someone wants to invest, I mean, if it's Berlusconi that seeks popularity to be prime minister and then he spends money in Milan, why not? If it is Abramovich that wants to be accepted in the UK, why not? If it is Americans seeking profits from the other side of the Atlantic, why not? And by the way, when you say it's a business, it's important to remember the concept of corporate social responsibility. When Milton Friedman last century said the business of business is business, well, he was outdated by several different challenges that arose from that point on. Some of them, not because the companies wanted to be social responsible, but because they had to respond to environmental lawsuits, and then they decided to be upfront and do something before they got sued. Nike, that's a good example from sports. You might remember that in the United States, there were NGOs saying that Nike was using child labor to produce their goods, and people started to boycotting Nike products. And what they did? Well, they joined with Adidas and created a big campaign against child labor. They closed all the factories that were doubtfully, allegedly, using children to produce their goods because it hurt their business. And when we talk about Microsoft and other companies and compare them with sports, well, it's difficult to compare apples with bananas in the sense that, well, the United States has also some very good lesson, which is find the need and you have found the business. So if you find the purpose for sports, if you find this need society craves for sports, you find financing for that. There is a research at the UN showing that for each dollar invested in sports, you save $3.6 in healthcare costs, which means it is on the public interest to invest public money in sports for the people because they will save money afterwards. And there is much more money in public budget than in any investment funds around the world. So if you can really position sports to serve society, funds will not be the problem because the need is there, the potential to address this need is also there, and the money is available either to education, to health, to public safety.
But who pays for it? The investor who owns the club or the local authority?
Look, if we are saying that a club gives back social returns, well, society should pay, but in a measurable tool. Like, let's take the World Cup just for a second. Can you imagine the World Cup happening without public money being invested? The biggest sponsor of the Olympic Games and the World Cup is the public sector that builds stadiums, that bid for the event. So if there was no public investment in there, there wouldn't be this top event in our chain of sports, which means, again, if sport is at the service of humanity, is at the service of society, investors are welcome. But then we have funds from social interest flowing into sports as well and saving the highest number of clubs we saw in the previous presentation. We're not talking about the 20, the hundreds. We're talking about thousands of clubs that need to exist so that these top clubs can get players formed from this pyramid. I mean...
And let's move on to Andrew. I mean, from your perspective, do you get public money at Bologna?
No, but what I would say is there seems, it's interesting the different point of view when it comes to looking at people investing into sport and thinking that with that mentality of wanting to be profitable, you can also care about the community. Yeah. So you do both. And if you can build up a club to be more sustainable commercially, then you can help your community even more and do it over time. So with that said, I do also think it's important that you monitor and make sure who are team owners coming into a league. Because if you let just anyone in, they might not have the money, they might not have the business wherewithal to run the club properly, and then the club spirals out of control, which you see all the time. And then the community and the supporters are the ones who suffer from that. So you want to make sure you have a group coming in that, one, has the expertise from an operations perspective, two, has a financial wherewithal to be at that table, but three, before they join, you want to make sure that your partners around the table also share the same sentiment that sport is important to the community. You wouldn't have a club if it wasn't for the supporters in that community, and they need to support that. And I think you can do all the above, but it does speak to the importance of making sure that you have the right investors coming in. In some leagues, it's extremely controlled. In other leagues, there's no control over it whatsoever.
No, and you see serial offenders, as we've seen in England. Yeah. I mean, Oliver, football, if we go back 20 years, when I got involved, there hardly any regulation. There's no such thing as a sports lawyer, which some of you may say was a good thing, but it's created jobs for us. The game has changed markedly. Has it gone far enough in the way it regulates finance, financial fair play? We've seen La Liga full frontal attack on certain other leagues in this European market. It's an interesting dynamic. FIFA Pro giving their views. What needs to change, or have we done enough?
I think change come organically as football grows, changes, regulations, they arise. Because some of the issues we are facing now, no one expected them to arise 20 years ago. So, and regulation will always be a few steps behind what's happening. So in that sense, I think the increasing complexity of football, and what you have is that this complexity is mainly driven by the markets that are generating more revenue, and this is concentrated really, especially on the big 5 markets in Europe. So you cannot compare what's happening here to Brazil or to South America, for example. The values are very different, and the regulations then also here, because all the interest is coming here, all the investment money is focusing here. You can afford to have more regulation because you have bigger demand, as opposed to markets where you don't have that. You can be more loose in terms of regulations, because if you were too strict, there's not that much money available. You will cut that money, the availability, half. So I think, in a sense, each market has its very unique characteristics. It's whatever the stakeholder demands from that specific market. So this complexity is only increasing, and I think we are nowhere yet of the end of this complexity. I think it's gonna be much crazier than it's at this present moment.
Well, certainly, Pablo, from your perspective, owning clubs, consulting, running clubs. So I was on the phone this morning. People want to buy a team. It's a trophy asset purchase for them. Other people want to buy a team that we're talking to who want to do it so they can make some money. Should clubs just be free to spend what they want? Or do you think we need tighter regulation if we're going to maintain competitive balance?
We have a strong limitation in Spain, a lot of control, financial control. And I think it's fine, because we had 25 years ago a problem that kamikaze investor ask for debts, pay extra money to the players, distortion the competition, and they bankrupt the club, and then you are in a mess. So it's fine that you are able to spend in a proportion, on a function to your incomes. So you have a healthy competition, and everybody is playing with the same cards.
And are you seeing this, if we're looking forward, are we going to see tighter regulation, the same, or less, in your view, in Europe?
I think that it will be the higher, better regulation for financial fair play, control of the expenses in function of your incomes. And this is the way that the competition is healthy, and everybody can play the same cards.
Yeah, because I presume that in Brazil it's the same as in Spain, as in England, in the MLS. You want to be able to see a little bit of uncertainty as who's going to win a league and a competition. My team, Bournemouth, if we survive in the Premier League for another year, fantastic. But that's what it's about. We're not going to finish in the top 6. From your perspective, in Brazil and what you're seeing, have all the changes and the changes to third-party ownership, how has that impacted, and do you need to see that change again going forward?
Well, looking at the UK and seeing Leicester being champion of the Premier League recently shows that it's not only about money. And these changes that really impacted the budget of Brazilian clubs, because when FIFA has forbidden the third-party ownership, it was something very, very important to us, because our clubs, they had been financing themselves through this mechanism, because they didn't have any other investment to attract investment, and that was the way they could get money from third parties. So we don't have it any longer, but the Brazilian clubs' revenues have been growing ever since. We have clubs now, Flamengo, for instance. I mean, considering our exchange rate being very bad right now for us, we have mostly the same revenue than Porto, Benfica, and the top clubs in Portugal, in reais. Imagine when our economy gets better, and then the exchange rates gets more favorable to us, then we have clubs that can compete anywhere in the world. But I just wanted to throw a provocation to the panel, another one.
It's very welcome.
Yes.
But we're having no fights. We said that earlier.
If we look at the horizon, do you see the current business model based on TV rights as something sustainable, considering that the young people, they don't watch TV any longer. They watch videos on YouTube in average 1.5 minutes. Can you see any young guy watching 90 minutes football in any platform? Can you see TV getting sponsors? If you look at the sponsorship, the advertisement, higher on internet than on TV right now, and the internet not buying as much or for as much sports rights. How do you see this in the horizon? I mean, do we have the same money in the future?
So we take that question, essentially, it's a great point. One of the premises was that media rights are stagnating, if not dropping off. If that happens, Andrew, where are you going to get the money from to pay the salaries, or are salaries going to go down?
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean the audience is gone. It just means it's being presented in a different way. Clearly, the monetization model differs from where you're not relying, or you can no longer rely on just a few major broadcast deals. But there are ways to monetize that content now on a more global basis than what you're doing now with terrestrial and pay TV. Corporate sponsorship, this is why you see a lot of the larger clubs now opening offices in Shanghai and in New York City and in Mexico City, because they're now expanding their brand presence into other countries. That's also part of the model of investing into other teams in other countries. As you start to build a fan base, like a lot of these bigger clubs understand they have fans in other countries because that's where their players come from. But they don't necessarily have data or means of monetizing those fans, right? So now you can start to build a commercial platform to do so. So you have to get creative. The business model shifts, for sure. It's a challenge.
So, I mean, Oliver, one of the problems we've had in English football is the prevalence of betting companies, with a large number of teams relying on betting company sponsorship. Who are going to be the kingmakers in shaping the future landscape of football? Is it the betting companies, the sponsors? Is it the leagues, or are they outdated and irrelevant now? Are the owners?
I think what we're having now, it's a movement as football is perhaps finishing its expansion globally, and the new technology comes in. You have a concentration of revenue into the best products, which is, I think it's normal. So you have the better leagues and competing to have the better products, and they will concentrate more of the money. And that, because of the appeal of that product per se, I think that will also expand in terms of audience. So in a sense, I do not think we have reached yet the highest value for broadcasting. I think there's still somewhere to go, but perhaps not at the same rate that we were, and certainly more concentrated on the better products. But what will happen is that this broadcasting money that will come up to these main leagues, and including not only the national leagues, but also, of course, Champions League, will then be spread through the industry in other indirect ways, transfers, bigger clubs owning, investing in other countries, structuring systems where you can have a player at a cheaper value, more identified with the system you're using. So again, we are going through for a long time in a changing environment, but I do think that the structure where the broadcaster will be the main player, the sponsors will be a secondary source of revenue, and then you have obviously betting companies are good for smaller clubs because they see more return on the investment. But I do see broadcasting still being the key driver for the bigger clubs, and this money from the bigger clubs will be spread into the industry in other senses, especially through player trading.
I mean, Pablo, for you, you've got a fascinating ownership model. If we're sitting here in 10 years' time,
well, I agree
what do you think the club? How do you think the clubs are going to be owned? Are they going to still be this mix of fan ownership and community ownership and investors, or is it going to change?
I think it's unstoppable that the investor coming from everywhere investing in football clubs, because it's a very sexy investment. You have a company that don't have clients, that fans, that is working with the heart of the people. People go to bed crying if the team lose. Nobody goes to bed crying if Microsoft go down in the stocks. So that's why it's so sexy. So it's so nice to work in the industry. And that's why many people is coming, and a lot of money is coming to be in this fancy business. That's why millionaires have this expensive toy instead of buy a new boat, because it's more fun and it's nice.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing you need to be able to watch live.
Sorry?
It's the one thing you need to watch live.
Yeah.
There's not much point watching highlights of the game if you already know the result.
And
to a degree.
in the figures today, more and more, the TV rights, the people see the match live. A lot of people see the match delay, and a lot of people see the highlights, depends on the market. And this is coming to the audiovisual market every day. So everybody see next day the matches in Japan of the Spanish La Liga, or in the States, or in Brazil, because you can be overnight every day to see the matches. So the consumption of the football, how you say, is changing. But still the people, as we're watching the matches, highlights are becoming more and more important depending on the market.
And I know Pedro we're going to come to you, very eager to get in there. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you, Pedro, to make a comment, but then we'll leave a couple of minutes for questions. Pedro, from your perspective, great audience here, future landscape of football. What's the one key factor that is going to shape that future if we were debating this and we come back in 3-4 years and look back?
Engagement.
And I'm going to ask everybody that, but
It's direct engagement. If you look at the audience watching on TV, it's an indirect engagement somehow, because TV makes money out of paying TV or advertisement. So it's indirectly the fan engaging with the club. Sports betting, on the contrary, it's a direct engagement. Look at the amount of money the FIFA World Cup had in sports betting. $136 billion in online sports betting in the matches of the World Cup in Russia. If you add all the revenues FIFA had, everything up, around 6 billion. So TV rights, sponsorships, licensing, tickets, 6 billion. Sports betting, 136 billion. So follow the money. Let's get sports maybe operating their own books, but just
own betting
coming
books.
back, betting books. I'm not sure I understood correctly. You said millionaires, they can buy Ferraris, boats, and if you have money enough, football clubs.
Exactly.
It's in the same level.
Yeah.
So it's a toy.
For some hours, it's like this. And that's why I said at the beginning, you are competing with clubs with different interests. The first question that you have to make is, why are you in this business? And in football, this answer is not easy. And it's not the same for every club.
For the billionaires club,
you have to worry about the owner that doesn't know the answer to that. Andrew, from your perspective, the one key factor that's going to shape the business of football over the next few years?
I like it.
Well, piggybacking on engagement, it's data. So understanding who your fans actually are and then being able to reach them. And today it's still very early, and for even the biggest clubs in the world to be able to quantify and qualify who their fan base is.
And same question to you, Oliver. I mean, you're working with leaders of the future across sport at the Johan Cruyff Institute. What is the one thing you're majoring on with them?
I think that through all the changes that football has gone throughout the years, there's one thing that has remained the same, is that people will still follow teams that are winning, and winning will always be the key driver of the industry, winning on the pitch. So whatever happens outside the industry will always be translated in how can you improve competitive conditions for a club, because a club that doesn't win doesn't have an audience, regardless. Well,
especially
that's another long debate.
That's another discussion, because if you look at closed leagues, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, there's plenty of audience. You don't have to win.
Yeah.
Oh, well, specific U.S. market.
Well, the IOC would say more important than winning is participating.
That's a good advert. Coming back to Miami in November for the next Soccerex to hear this debate continued. Pablo, if you could wrap up, and then we'll see if there's questions if we have time. For you, that one key factor apart from winning everything.
It depends on the market. There are some markets in Croatia, they only come if you win. In England, the people still go with their team, even in third division, losing, and the stadium is full. Depends on the culture of the country. Have a lot to do with it. It's not a pattern in everywhere. It depends on the place.
it's been a great debate. I'm conscious that the guys have turned up, given some great insight. Are there any questions out there at all? We can't actually see you that easily because we're being dazzled here. But if you'd like to put your hand up, say who you are, do ask a question.
Nick Lau has a question.
Well, if there is a question, please. It's just coming.
Thank you very much. Now you can hear me. So my name is Joe from Olympics in Dubai. So we are more concerned with Asian soccer usually, but it's very interesting to be here in Europe, to see your different perspectives. Just from our perspective, like we've seen the balance sheets of a lot of clubs across Asia, basically. And I think it also holds for many clubs in Europe that there are usually, like you said, not many profits made by football clubs. So mainly, most of the clubs, even the big clubs in Asia, they operate at a loss, and they're actually dependent on the owner's financial input. So my question is, maybe you said it already, it's a toy for millionaires sometimes, but if you're approached by an investor who actually wants to make some money out of the club maybe in the future. So the question is, from your perspective, what could be like maybe 1 or 2 key arguments for an investor who's looking for financial sustainability and financial profits in the future? So how can you convince a rich guy to buy a club if he's interested in making profits in the long run? What are the 2 or 3 key arguments from your perspective?
Andrew, someone comes knocking on your door.
Yeah. So it's very dependent on the market. So the first thing you have to look at, especially in football, is which country are you talking about? Because they all have very different dynamics. There's some opportunities in certain countries where you're going to operate at a loss, but if that loss is not significant and you feel that your ownership group has a wherewithal to sustain and write those checks every year, you might see at a 10, 15-year horizon, if it's a growing league, that you have value appreciation. So therefore, maybe being break-even is okay. If you look at Major League Soccer today, most of those teams operate at a loss, and they're in their now over 20 years of operating. However, when I started in the sport back then, you could purchase an MLS club for $2-3 million. Now, just to buy in for the rights to a team is over $150 million, and you still have to build a stadium. So it's very dependent on the marketplace, but there's macro elements to it. So to your point, why don't you see investment into Brazil the way you do into Europe? It's looking at the macro environment, the political stability, overall economic stability of the country. Next step, infrastructure. Are your grounds good? Do you have to build a stadium? Do you have economic control? So it becomes a very specific study across different countries and then across different markets within that country.
Pablo?
I would like to comment. It's commonly accepted that you buy a club and then you increase the value of the club and then you make profit out of buying and selling the club.
Yeah.
It's not that well accepted now to have a dividend or to take money out of the club. I think that will be something that is happening more and more commonly in the next years. So we'll see in the following years more professional management, more company face of the clubs, and more dividends and more this kind of thing. Today, it's not working like that.
Certainly, we're seeing that. It's the investor that thinks that they can find players in a better way, that they can get more from the existing players, that they can look at the infrastructure and develop it. So we're certainly seeing more sophistication in how people are looking at buying the clubs. And any other questions, by the way? Question there.
Yes, I'm João Fugero. I'm here with FIFA Master Alumni, which is one of the partners of Soccerex for the event. And I want to pretty much follow up a bit in that question, but particularly since I'm a fellow Brazilian of Oliver and Pedro, and he said that would be a good idea to invest in Botafogo, which is a club that has a very, very high debts, and probably the owner won't be able to sell the club after, like Pablo just said, that is one of the ways that people actually think of investment, not actually taking dividends. I would like to ask Pedro, why then would be a good idea for someone to invest, particularly in Botafogo?
Because the lawyers involved in the operation are the best in the world. That's the first response.
Are you declaring an interest? Or?
I am the lawyer with One to Will involved in that operation because we represent a very important family in Brazil that owns the biggest bank. They support Botafogo, and they are those really helping, shaping this project so that Botafogo can follow up on this. I believe it's a very, very good opportunity. Let's see how it unfolds. But I'd like to go back to the first question, just saying, if you look at the investors' profile in football, clearly, most of them, they have made their money elsewhere. So they're not there because they need money. They're there because they want a Ferrari, a boat, they want to spend money, they want to be accepted, they want to take people to their VIP boxes, they want to live life large. And they buy a football club. So if
Rising horse.
Yes, as well.
Or they want to do something for their community.
Which is
because
true.
you're talking about the big
like
clubs.
that.
There's a lot of other clubs.
It's true. In the United States.
If you have the wherewithal to support a community asset, and you don't care about making money off of it, but it gives back to your community, that's a big reason.
And your points, now our discussion saying that they go together.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the NFL. The NFL with the public service announcements in every match since the 70s. The NFL was the first sports organizations to really take care about corporate social responsibility in their community. FIFA just founded a department based on our final thesis at the FIFA Master in 2004 and a FIFA Foundation last year. So the world is much behind the United States in this regard.
But fascinating that the NFL is probably the most difficult membership club to break into. Because if you're not liked, you're not getting in.
And they serve community. They're Sunday warriors. They are everyday heroes through the public service announcements.
NBA also make a good job with the community. Yeah. Very good.
Any other questions before we get booted off the stage? If there are none, gentlemen, fantastic insight. Thank you so much. Thank you all for attending, and the guys will be here to answer questions. Thank you.